Hey, welcome to Faders Up. I'm your host, Trovarsi. And yes, this is the last Faders Up for the year. And I have a very special guest for all of you tonight. She is a composer, performer. She plays the trumpet, modular synthesis. Many of you have had the opportunity, hopefully, and if you haven't, you need to do it, to experience seeing her experimental and improvisational interactive performances that she creates. And she's an educator, and she also co-designed a sensor-based interface called Mixy, and we'll get into that as well. But without further ado, we have Sarah Belle Reid. Hey, Sarah.
Hi. Hello.
Welcome to Faders Up. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone out there.
Thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I've been following you for a long time, and you've just been doing so many amazing things. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm super happy to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so wait, now before we get into all these questions that I have for you, and I'm sure our people, our regulars in the chat, I just want to quickly say hello, Malarkey, Electronic Sounds. I see you out there. Thank you for joining us, and everyone, make sure you drop your questions in the chat as we move through the show. We're going to play your performance, and then we will get into it.
Sounds great.
Cool. All right.
Okay.
Amazing.
Thank you.
I love those,
Excuse me.
the textures, cinematic. I felt like I was listening to like a movie score and like think something was going to happen. Plunderphonic goodness for sure. That's what comes to mind.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I had a lot of fun exploring that sound world for sure.
It was
Thank you,
amazing.
everybody. I can see the chat. Thank you.
There was some questions in the chat too, which I want to jump into get into those questions, but
Sure.
let's talk about, tell us what you were doing, and then maybe it'll answer those questions, and if not, I'll circle back and get those questions in.
Yeah, for sure. So th- I, I was playing the easel command, which you could see that was the main hardware instrument that I had there.
Yes.
And it's, to be completely honest, that I'm just borrowing this instrument. I it's not actually mine, and I have it for a short while, and I was like, okay, I need to spend as much time with this thing as possible and use it as much as possible. So when you invited me to do this, I was like, great, an opportunity
Perfect.
to dig even deeper into this instrument. So it's still quite new to me, to be honest. That's why I'm telling you that. There's still so much I think to discover, but that's the beauty of these instruments, is that they kind of, you know, they go as deep as you want them to go, I think. Um,
Right.
anyway, and so the other thing that I was doing was using my computer, and I was running a program in Max MSP, which is a program that I can
Okay.
talk more about maybe if there's interest, but it's something that I okay, yeah. So
Yeah, let's definitely talk about
it's
it.
I call it
Yes.
the Mixy app. It was something that was co-developed by myself and Ryan Gaston, who I do a lot of my collaborative work with. Um, and it's the accompaniment
Mhm.
software. It's the software that accompanies my hardware, the interface that you talked about in briefly at the very top of when you were introducing me, that goes onto my trumpet. So that's a
Yes.
hardware thing and there's a software component. But the fun thing is, recently I've been kind of enjoying using the software side kind of as a extra synth voice and a processor for more modular stuff. So that's what I was doing
Okay.
there.
And
Max
that's
MSP.
written
Yeah.
in MSP, Max MSP. Okay. Because I know somebody asked
Oh,
about Reactor,
oh,
so
yeah,
I just
no, it
wanna
wasn't
get
Reactor,
that in
it's
there
Max MSP.
clarified.
It's a program that's been in development for, you know, the better half of the past decade, and it's something that we're just piecing together piece by piece as we kind of have an idea like, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool to, you know, make it
Do
do this? So
this.
let's try," A couple months later, there's kind of an awkward prototype, and then it works its way in, and it's just been built out like that over the course of many, many, many years.
So
So,
are you running it as a standalone?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, and it's fun because it extends. I really love small setups. I'm always a big fan of tiny instrumental setups that I can carry with me or put it in a backpack, something like that. I think that might pull over from my acoustic instrument days, just the portability aspect. And so
Right.
when you mix the laptop in, it just, it allows you to expand the sound and the functionality infinitely without having to add any more hardware, which personally I'm a big fan of. Um,
Mhm.
Everyone has something that works best for them, of course, but
Right. I like the
I like
integration of having the
I like
hybrid
both.
setups.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like the hybrid aspect a lot. It's fun. Yeah.
So now, okay, so you had the Buchla command,
Yes.
correct? And with the Mac, so you were saying that that's another voice. Were there any of any
It was
effects
doing
happening, or was it doing a couple of different, like what specifically was it?
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't have said another voice exactly. That was not 100% accurate. It was doing some processing of the
Okay.
sound. So all the sound was originating from the easel command, and then I was running it into my computer and doing some granular processing. That's how
Okay.
you some of those, like, strange chirpy creatures.
It's
That's how I
yeah,
like to
that's
think of them. You know what I'm talking about? The strange
yeah,
chirpy
yeah. It
They
sounded
were kind of
yeah.
granularized from there, and, also some delay excuse me, some delay and feedback stuff happening,
Okay.
um, and I think that might be it, but for the sound itself was coming from the easel, yeah.
The easel. Okay. And then how are you what's the connectivity, or how are you routing that? Like, are you using like an interface, like a ES8 or 9 or something, or how or
I
how
was
how are you how is
just
it all connecting?
I'm looking behind me to remind myself what I was doing. I was just running the sound itself into my audio interface. Yeah, so I was just using my I have a universal
Mhm.
audio interface. I was running it into there and then
Okay.
you running it into Max that way. Um, and then out from Max to my main,
Got it. Okay.
recorder slash monitors. Um,
Very
yeah,
cool.
so it wasn't too fancy or anything. And since I wasn't sending control information or anything back and forth, just the audio. And
Okay.
and it was only going in one direction, so I just used the regular audio interface. It didn't need to be an ES8 or anything
Got
special.
you. And also there was like a mention in the chat about how the sequencer was like going the speed of the sequencer. So I was like, are you sequencing then actually on the easel, or are you so you
Yeah.
were oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, the
Not
sequencer was just working really hard, yeah. The pulsar it's cool on the easel if you get the sequencer going and the pulsar and the envelope. If you get them all going fast enough, they'll just produce, they'll produce basically tones.
okay.
Um, so that's a fun technique that I like to play with, and then you can kind of slow them down slightly and kind of you have this feeling that you're, like, pulling apart the sound, It's like this continuous tone, but then it's, like, coming in apart into pieces. Um,
Yeah, it
but yeah,
sounds
it was definitely they were going really fast.
yeah. Someone
Yeah.
actually wrote about it in the chat. They're like, that sequencer.
Oh, it's so funny. Yeah, I see the sequencer is going at warp speed. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I know. Yeah, I'm using it a little more like an audio like almost a little more like an audio effect or like an oscillator than an actual sequencer in a more traditional sense, I guess. Yeah.
Got it.
I really like that texture. So,
It sounded great. Like,
thanks.
and that's yeah.
Yeah.
So I asked about the connectivity and all that because one of the things that we talk about I like to ask the guests, especially playing live and we'll get into your journey with, starting with music, for example, the trumpet, but how you build those live setups. Like you already kind of touched on that you have this piece with limited time, so you wanted to use it for this, which I think is amazing. So thank you. But
Thank
in
you.
general, when you're picking like your setup, like what's your process on that? Like, since you do play the trumpet, it is a big instrument in your life. Is that like a go-to and then start there? Or do you maybe start somewhere else and then get to there? Like, what's your process?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I do, the trumpet is, I still kind of think of the trumpet as my main voice, my main instrument. It's definitely the one that I'm the most familiar with. I've been playing it for basically forever. Um, and I often think in trumpet, if that makes any sense. That sounds like such a nerdy thing to say, but you know how people are like, yeah, I think in this language, or I think in this language. Often when I'm hearing sound, I'll kind of hear it like through the lens of how I could potentially create that
That makes
on
sense.
a brass instrument. Um,
Mhm.
but I'm always kind of imagining it in some kind of extended way. So like not just the acoustic horn, but the acoustic horn like run through, you know, a cool sorry, I don't know if that sound just came through.
No, I didn't
Sorry.
hear anything.
Okay, good.
I didn't. I don't think anyone in the chat.
Like acoustic horn run through, a cool delay or a granular processor or some kind of effect to kind of transform it into an otherworldly sound. So I think to answer your question, it's definitely different for every piece and every performance for
Okay.
me. And I think maybe what I do is I start with a concept before I start with an instrument. And then like I have some kind of idea or a concept of a kind of a world that I might want to explore, or um a theme or an idea, or something that I've read recently that's on my mind, or it literally
Mm.
could come from anywhere. And when I start to think about how that might kind of come together in sound, um, whatever the sounds are that I'm imagining will lead me to an instrument. I hope that makes
No,
sense.
totally. So you feel like it creates sort of a mood and then kind of
Yeah.
thing, and then you hear like
Yeah.
what type of
Yeah, I
tone
very
or harmonics?
seldom yeah, exactly. I very seldom will write or think about a piece specifically for an instrument first. I'm usually more interested in thinking about the sound first, and then what the instrument is that's gonna let me get that sound.
Got it.
So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, so when I'm thinking about live performances, I'll often dream up some kind of vibe or world, and then I'll come to it through some combination of maybe modular plus trumpet, or laptop plus trumpet, or in this case,
Mm.
laptop and, you know,
The
the
buka.
easel, and yeah, so it's very different. I don't really have like one go-to uh configuration. I like to keep it keep it
Keep it moving.
flexible.
Yeah, I get it, I get it. You're
Yeah.
talking to somebody who's probably not played with the same set of twice in a row, so
Okay,
I
cool. So
understand.
you get it. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
has its pros and cons, but I understand.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah, it's nice to stick with something as well, but I just feel like there's so much to explore, and
Mhm.
I can't, I'm just so curious that I wanna keep
Trying it
trying new
out.
things. And it's not so much like I'm moving on, because I've been playing trumpet for decades, and I've been playing, the same modular synth, but with different patches and slightly different combinations of modules for a long time as well. So it's not like I'm totally abandoning and going to a new
Mm.
world or a new setup. I'm just reconfiguring the pieces and like slightly adjusting their
Shifting.
relationship to one another and all that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, like who's in the lead and that kind of thing.
I like it.
Yeah, cool.
So you say you've been playing for decades. So let's kind of I want to just back up a little bit. And again, also just everyone, again, thank you for tuning in. We have Sarah Belle Reid for Faders Up. And please drop your questions for her in the chat to make sure we can get those answered for you. But so when did you start playing the trumpet?
I was 7, something like
Okay.
that. It was like a little a little one.
And what made you
Um,
pick the trumpet?
it
Wait,
kind of the trumpet kind of found me. I wanted to play you know, it's so funny. I wanted to play like a band instrument because I wanted to play music with people and be cool and be in a band. And my parents, I was young enough that my parents were like, "Okay, sure, we're not gonna necessarily go buy you an instrument because we don't know if this is gonna pass, like, you won't wanna do this next Friday." So, coincidentally, conveniently, my someone in my family had an old marching band trumpet that they had played or, that their son had played probably 20 years prior, and it had been sitting in their garage collecting dust, and it got very generously given to me, and it was my first trumpet, and I really liked it. I just kind of, um took to it, and that
nice.
became the rest of my life. Sorry.
No, I get it.
Outburst. Yeah, it was just it clicked, and I don't play that exact trumpet anymore, thankfully, because it was pretty old and dusty, but,
Do you still have it?
I sure do. Yeah, it's in my
Okay.
closet. That's the kind of thing you keep forever,
Yeah, yeah.
got the sentimental value. Yeah.
Of course, yeah. So, okay, so then you wanted to so as you played the trumpet through the years and you got older, I assume you played in through high school and all that. Did you have a specific genre of music that you enjoyed playing more than another, like jazz, classical, mar
Yeah.
or not that?
Yeah,
Anything
yeah,
else
I
in
really
between?
was I wanted to be I thought that what I was gonna do was be a classical trumpet player in an orchestra. That's really what I what I wanted to do. It's funny to think about now just because of how different a turn my life has taken, but that was definitely the direction I wanted to go when I was in high school. I went into college as an undergrad student in Canada. I was in Montreal at the time, and I went to study classical orchestral trumpet. That was my whole focus. And it wasn't until later on that I started to discover that electronic music even existed and that improvised music existed and that, these things could
Mm,
collide and intersect. And there was so much more that I just wasn't aware of.
mm,
Um, so it was like a total floodgates moment for me that really wasn't a moment. It was like many years of kind of grabbing onto things and discovering all of this new stuff,
mm,
and then eventually that led me into this place that I am now where I'm
mm.
really I tend to refer to myself as an electroacoustic musician because I'm really working in both of these acoustic and electronic worlds
Got
simultaneously. Yeah.
So is that when you had your discovery of electronic music, is that when you also discovered modular, or did that come later?
I think it was around the same time.
Okay.
I saw a concert, and someone was playing a small Eurorack instrument, and it just was like this most incredible thing I'd ever seen. I didn't know that these instruments existed. I didn't know that there were words for them. Like I honestly didn't know any of it. I was just like colorful cables, blinking lights, cool sounds. What is this? Alien technology. And around the same time I was in school at the time, so I was able to enroll in an audio, um oh, what was it? It was an audio programming class where we were learning Chuck, which is this this audio programming language for real-time
Okay.
programming. And it's not something that I do, I don't really use Chuck very much anymore, but it was my kind of entry point into making sound on a computer.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, and it was pretty exciting.
Nice.
Yeah.
So then was that kind of like so then how did you really where was the turning point for you, I guess, then where you were like, "Okay, like, I'm going to get into modular." Was it the Eurorack, or was it the Bupa,
No,
or
it
was
was
it like what?
actually oh, yeah. So modular in particular, it was actually Surge, believe it or
Okay.
not. Because I was at CalArts at the time, which is a school in Southern California, and in the studio there are 2 big, beautiful, old vintage Surge systems,
Okay.
um, that have been there for decades, for a long time.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so we had access to them as students, and I didn't know really how they worked, but I kind of gradually started to learn. And um, the Ryan, who is the person I mentioned earlier, who's one of the co-creators of Mixy, was there at the same time and had already been exploring doing some modular stuff and Eurorack stuff. So he was really helpful. And yeah, I just kind of spent hours in that studio.
Nice.
Thankfully for me, not a lot of people were taking advantage of it, so it meant that I could really kind of live in there, and,
Have your that private time of just like
yeah, really early mornings, I would get coffee and come in at, like, you know, 6, 7 in the morning, and no one would be in the building at all, and I would just sit there with mi this synthesizer that's literally big enough to be like a it's huge.
right.
It's enormous. It's like 5, 6 feet big or something. I'm probably exaggerating, but it's huge. And just slowly coaxing out sounds and kind of learning how things work and falling in love with filters, all that stuff. Just like, wow, it's so cool. Yeah,
Filters.
filters. I
Yeah.
think that might have been what did it for me
That's great.
was discovering filters. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Wait, there's a question in the chat by Malarkey. If you just pop it up there. It's about the postcard project. What's the
Oh,
background inspiration for the abstract scores?
that's a great question. It's a bit of a topic change. Is that okay with you, or do you wanna come
Um,
back around to it? I'm happy to answer
I'd
the
say
question.
answer it. Let's go.
Okay, I'm just letting
We're
you
just having a
know.
free-flowing conversation here. No
Okay,
worries.
okay.
I will make sure we circle back
We're
and
gonna take a right turn just like my trajectory through the music world did, so it's very on point. The postcard project. Yeah, so the postcard project, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's something that I started, like, 3 or 4 years ago at this point with my Patreon community,
Mm,
and basically it's this long distance collaboration via Postcard, where I make a graphic score on the back of a postcard and I mail it to people wherever they are in the world, and then they have the opportunity to use that score to make sound in any way that they want to. And graphic scores,
mm.
um, if you're not familiar with what they are, they're basically just like pictographic representations of sound. So they're very open ended. You could have squiggly lines or colorful circles or anything, and you
Okay.
can interpret that in sound in any way that you want. Like, you could look at a line that goes like this and think of that as a pitch reference, or you could look at different colors and think of them as different, like, the different
Frequencies or something
complexities of
or
sound or frequencies, exactly. So
okay, okay.
it's just kind of meant to be this exploratory and very, open-ended collaboration. And, the inspiration for that started while I was also at CalArts, the same place that I was talking about with the surge systems.
Okay.
Um, I was doing some work with some really, really amazing composers and musicians there, one of whom is named Wadada Leo Smith. He's a amazing jazz improviser and trumpet player and composer, and I strongly recommend anyone who has an interest in kind of improvisation and just experimental music to look him up, because he's really an amazing person. And he has actually developed an entire musical and notational language. It's all
Oh,
colorful and
wow.
it looks like planets and all this cosmic stuff, and it's so intriguing, and I was really, really mesmerized by this. And so I worked with him. He was one of my composition teachers.
Okay.
Um, in our composition lessons, you'd kind of expect you'd talk about, like, this note and then this rhythm and maybe this harmony and
Right.
orchestration, but we
A
would
little
talk
more
about, like,
structured.
yeah, we would talk about, like,
Right.
redness, or, like, I'm not joking, and, like,
No,
what redness would mean in sound.
right.
Anyway, it might sound totally crazy to some people, but for me, it was a really, really impactful thing in my life at that time, and the Postcard project grew more or less out of that. It's just a fun way you don't need to be able to learn, or sorry, you don't need to be able to read music in order to kind of make a meaningful connection with these symbols and use it as a jumping off point for your own music making. And that's something that I really love. It's very like accessible to anyone. All you need to be able to do is, have an imagination and be like, maybe red is loud. Maybe blue means short,
Right.
maybe
Do
up
they do
means
they
pitch.
send do they send you the music back? Do they send it back to you then? So, and
Yeah.
then the
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, they send me the music when they make something, and then they can also send me back a postcard that they make. So they
okay.
have the opportunity to also be like play the composer role, and then I make an interpretation of their postcard. If anyone wants to check it, there's a on my website.
You would have dropped. We have your Patreon. Is that it's your on your
Yeah,
Patreon account or your
it's
website?
run well, it is run through my Patreon, but there's like an archive. Thank you. Oh, the link is there. Yeah. There's an archive on my website of all of the back and forth. So if anyone just kind of wants to like do like be a fly on the wall and look at what some of the other exchanges have been like, it's on my personal website. I can
Okay, we'll drop them both in the chat too for everyone, just so they have them handy in the website too. Nice.
Oh yeah, that's it. Perfect. Thanks. Yeah, it's so I hope that answers your question. I hope it wasn't too much of a tangent.
No,
Um,
I enjoy it. This is why we're here. Like, I want to get to know
yeah.
like all these things that you've done, and I have a question about a performance, but we'll get to that in a
Okay.
little bit. I do want to kind of circle back. Um, so you were introduced to the Surge system, and now like moving, I guess, moving forward. Then, so how did you? What was so you're playing the trumpet, and what triggered the Mixy then? So was that kind of
Yeah.
where did that sort of kind of come together in your mind that
Right.
needed to
Yeah.
have this interactive
That
performance?
is a good question. So all of this was kind of happening at once. This was a really amazing couple of years in my life where I was just in like permanent sponge mode. I like to think of it as sponge mode when you're like just absorbing everything. It's like I don't know. It's
Right.
ridiculous to
Like
say.
learning modular,
Yeah,
learning composition.
everything. Everything is different. It's so exciting. It was like everything was in vibrant, extra neon color all around me because I was being exposed to all this cool stuff. Um, but the trumpet thing happened. It was also so part of that class that I was telling you about where I was learning this programming language called Chuck. The
Okay.
part of it was to kind of dream up and design uh, a instrument of your own making that
Okay.
could be anything. A lot of people did like MIDI controller type things or literally, a synth, anything like that. And I was reading some I came across this article from a team of researchers who were at the University of Victoria in British Columbia, I believe. I hope I'm remembering that correctly. And they had been working on this device. We're getting deep in the weeds here,
No,
folks.
yeah, I want to know.
They were working on this device that used optical sensors to look basically look up the valves of a trumpet and detect valve displacement. And they were doing it, I believe, with I'm not sure, so I'm gonna not say what I was gonna say, but they were doing it with the purpose of maybe getting it out to some different trumpet players, but it never really proliferated. It kind of was something they developed and then they never made much music with it. But I found this article and I was so intrigued. And so I took it to my teacher and was like, can I do this, but like more, like bigger, expand on it more? And that turned
Right.
into Mixy. Um, he was super encouraging and was like, gosh, I don't know how, but go for it. And then um, again, Ryan Gaston is in the picture and he was like, I don't know how to do that, but let's figure it out. And so no one knew how
Cool.
to do it, but we basically had this article that this group at University of Victoria had written that got us part of the way there. And then we used a lot of exclusive, it was all open source technology. So all of the sensors and the various microcontrollers and devices we were using, um, like Arduinos and things like that, for those of you who are familiar
Okay.
with this world, it's all open
Mhm.
source. So that means that there's code and schematics and examples that are all online. So
Cool.
if you're like persistent enough, you can kind of piece it all together. And that's what we did. We didn't really have training in any of this, but we like scoured web forums and, took a
Try to,
lot of example code and just pieced it all together over the course of many, many months.
and you did
Um,
this in Max MSP then, or did you end up doing it Chuck first,
we
or
didn't do
what?
Yeah, I did some really early tests in Chuck, but it was not for me. It was not the right platform, so we pretty quickly moved over to Max. So there's
God.
the hardware component, which is all Arduino based.
Okay.
So there's like a tiny bit of Arduino code that runs on the board, and that basically just helps to get the data from the sensors on the trumpet. Um,
Okay.
and then that all gets sent to my computer, and then at that point it's in Max. Um,
Got it.
yeah, and there's a
Very
bunch
cool.
of yeah, there's a bunch of info about this as well, on my website and also on mixytrumpet.com. I think that's what it is.
Okay.
Mixy Trumpet?
MixyTrumpet.com.
I think so. I'm gonna double check really quickly, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Okay. We'll put all these links, just we'll also put them in the description
Cool,
after the
thank you.
show too, so
Yeah,
you can come back and circle
Mixy
back, and I have a
mixytrumpet.com.
few links in there right now, but I'll definitely drop that one on there too, because
Thanks.
yeah, people need to read
Yeah,
about
it's just,
it.
it's a lot to talk about, but that allows you to get deeper if you want to learn more about it. Um,
It's very cool. I mean, I've seen you do some very interesting things from like even, well, I don't know if you're using the Mixy thing at this time, but even like putting your trumpet in water and doing different things to create different sounds through that
yeah,
way. And
I think I was. I think that was early on. Um, yeah, I mean, it's so fun. I mean, I guess I just went straight into the technical stuff with Mixy, but it's probably useful to talk about just why it even exists. Basically, the
yeah,
idea is, I really wanted some way to connect my electronic and my acoustic worlds together
okay.
that allowed me to still play the trumpet and still be really in the moment musically. And a trumpet, you're
Mhm.
playing with this hand. This is your like how you change pitch, but you also need to hold it. And then there's also some tuning stuff you need to do with your left hand. So you don't really have a ton of free like real estate in order to turn knobs or deal with a patch on a modular synth. So the
Mm,
idea behind Mixy was how can I put sensors onto the trumpet so that my movements will be picked up,
mm.
um, and I can use that data as though I'm turning a knob or patching something together, but I don't actually have to touch the modular synth, or I don't actually have to touch the laptop computer. So it kind of acts like an interface between
Like another pair of hands, kind of.
like another pair of hands, yeah,
Got
or
it.
like another character in the piece. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so that
Have you
that
guys
was the design kind of idea behind it.
got it? So I know you have like a company or a website, right? Gradient Instruments. So
Yes.
we can kind of that I think
Sure,
that's a
sure.
good set.
Yeah.
And I have another question with that. Let's talk about gradient instruments,
Okay.
but also have you ever thought about creating the MIGSI for other instruments?
We have yeah, so Mixy kind of started this amazing collaboration between Ryan and I, and out of Mixy grew Gradient. Just to, like, give you the through line there. And Gradient is basically um, a a company/project that's focused on designing new instruments and new controllers and sound devices and just strange sonic
Mhm.
curiosities, I think is what we like to say. Um, and it's it's still in its infancy and it's still kind of growing.
Okay.
But our hope starting next year is to release a couple of things that we've been working on now for a long time that we're really, really excited to share with the world. Some different electroacoustic objects and instruments, and some more like I don't want to say too much, but some more, yes, sonic curiosities. Exactly. Someone put them. This is a perfect way.
Nice.
So if we'll talk more about it in the new year.
Okay.
But that, yeah, that kind of grew out of this. And then to answer your question about Migsies for other people, we definitely have talked about it. And we haven't done it yet just because it's so, you know, building just one of these has been a multi-year endeavor for us, and we're still working out
Mm,
all of it, you know?
right.
This is something that we're doing kind of in addition to everything else that we're doing. It's not our only focus, so development is pretty slow. Um, but we're pondering the idea, and we're definitely open to it. So we might make some like Migsy adjacent type
Got it.
things, you know? Um, we've Yeah, you know, because we've been learning everything as we've been doing it. We've really been like building the ship and driving it at the same time.
Right.
We
So
want to
you're like
kind of
experimenting and
yeah.
building and testing.
Yeah, exactly. So we're taking things slow. But stay tuned, I guess, is the best way to round that one out, I suppose.
All right.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, well, I'll definitely go back and circle back and check out Gradient Instruments. I think we put the link up and I'll put that in the description too so people can definitely find that and
Yeah.
keep their eye out for anything new. I want to ask you about okay, so sorry, I just completely lost my train of thought for just a moment. I was thinking about the whole Mixy and the piano in my mind because I have an acoustic piano over here, and I'm like, that could be that could be really interesting, like on the strings. But
Totally.
yeah,
There have been some electronically augmented piano. There are projects out there. I now, of course, I'm blanking on who. Maybe Sarah Nichols could be a person to look up. I think she made something called the Inside Out piano. Um, I
interesting.
might I might be mixing people and project names up, but anyway, there's a lot of cool stuff out there in terms of augmented instruments. I think if anyone's curious about looking this stuff up, that would be one of the keywords to kind of look up.
Like,
Acoustic instruments that have been augmented with electronics and sensors
interesting. Okay,
and different things like that. Yeah. Yeah,
thank you for sharing that.
of course.
So, like with everything, so you have your Patreon. I know you have been on this journey with music to getting your doctorate and all of this, and now I know recently um, you just launched a new program, and you may be taking pre registration for round 2, but it was a learning sounds and synthesis course.
Right.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about it, or
Yeah, sure.
yeah, please.
Yeah. So this the program that you're talking about is something I've kind of been wanting to do this for years, and I just hadn't found the right time to do it. But it grew out of the number of emails and DMs that I would get just saying, "Hey, Sarah, I want to learn how to make music with, my clarinet and my synthesizer, or my guitar and my synthesizer, or just my
Mhm.
synthesizer, but I don't know how to get started. I don't really know where to begin. It's overwhelming. It's scary. It's like I'm feeling too not techie enough. I'm like all of this stuff." And it got to a
Mhm.
point where I was like, okay, I have felt every single one of those things. And I think I know kind of how I can help.
Mhm.
um, help people like take those initial steps and get over those initial hurdles. So I I made it this online program to basically help walk people through synthesis, and not just modular synthesis, but kind of synthesis in general. So all of the
Okay.
building blocks, like what sound is, how acoustics works on a very fundamental level, how to make synth patches and do modular stuff. But then also, you know, because so much of my musical practice is this combination of performing and composing and improvising, I also like to talk a lot about, okay, now you know how to make a patch, but now let's talk about like structuring compositions and improvising with your synth and how that might be different from pre-planning and all
Right.
that kind of stuff. And how to add in acoustic instruments, of course, because that was my whole origin. That was my beginning. So that's kind of where the program brings you. The end is taking your modular and like expanding it out to the rest of the world, connecting your
God.
piano or your guitar or your MIDI sequencer or whatever you might have. Um, and it's been a blast. It's been so much fun and such a great learning experience for me as well. Um,
I'm sure because
yeah,
everybody's doing so many it's such a different there's so many different approaches, everybody wants to do something just slightly different enough, I'm sure, where
right.
you're just like, "Oh, yeah."
Yeah, it keeps you on your toes for sure. And the
Mm,
amazing thing is that even with the same set of building blocks and the same modules, 5 people, 10 people can do infinitely different things.
mhm.
And so I just find it's like every time I get to teach this class and work with new students, my practice is just expanding because I'm like, wow, I never thought about that. That's such a great idea. And then everyone gets to benefit from it because we do um, these like group coaching meetings, I guess. And so everyone kind of gets to
Kinda
grow
work
together
together.
and work
Yeah,
together on things. Yeah. Yeah.
that's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in collaboration. I feel like no matter what level or whatever, you can always learn something from the other. You're just learning information from each other, so, yeah,
Absolutely.
that's great. That's a great approach.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been a wonderful community and it's growing and the new group just getting started.
Okay.
And I'm already I mean, it's amazing.
How
Just
long how long is each segment
um
or group?
a f- it so maybe I 4 months or so. It's a little bit of an
Okay,
ambiguous thing because some parts are go at your own pace and don't have like a time limit.
got
Um
it,
But I'm anticipating probably opening enrollment a couple times a year. I think that might be sort of the heart of your question. So
got
I'm,
it.
you can be on the lookout, but it's not something that runs all the time. And the reason for that is that I work directly with everyone. So I need to kind of, chunk it out, I guess, so that I can
Yeah,
really focus on the people who are enrolled. And then once they go through, then I can open it back up again.
nice.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
sounds like a great program.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm, I'm having a great time, so
nice.
I'm grateful. I'm really grateful to be able to share this thing that I'm so, it's been so transformative in my life, and I'm so passionate about it, and being able to share it with other people is awesome. Just is the reason why I do it, so
Right, nice.
yeah.
I just wanna, like, check in with the chat, just make sure everyone is if there's any other questions. Hey, Jono, I think I saw that he mentioned that he met us both on the same day. I believe it was at Synthplex. Yes. And that's one thing that was great
Wow.
about the modular community is just like this synth fam, everyone likes to help and work together and just collaborating and
Yeah,
just what you're saying, like
absolutely.
working with people and teaching, yeah.
That was such a good oh, wow. Yeah, Synthplex.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That was a good day.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
One day we'll eventually be able to have those meetups and things. In the meantime, we'll have to continue to do the live stream things, which is great too.
It is. I've
Yeah.
actually been, of course I miss the in-person performance vibe. I mean, there's nothing like it being in the same room, making music in the same room as people. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I don't know, my mind has been totally blown by how much the live stream and like, Zoom call type thing has been able to bring the world, like you were saying, it's such a supportive, tight knit community. And I feel like it's just getting even more like that, you know?
That's
Um,
great because you can hang out with people in another country at any time, and it just really
exactly.
it
Yeah.
in some ways, I think it's really given us an opportunity to really get closer,
Yeah.
with
Yeah,
the community.
totally. And that's just so special. I mean, we were on a welcome call for the course a couple days ago, and there were folks from the US and Canada, but also from like, Taipei and Australia
That's
and
awesome.
the Netherlands and Chile, and like it was just I was like, this is the coolest thing that could possibly be happening. All of these people coming together to learn about modular synths.
Hey, I think it's amazing.
I know, I agree. I totally agree. So, yeah.
So, you mentioned, just the missing the interaction. I do wanna ask you, I know we're at the top of the hour, and, I wanna thank everyone for hanging out, and please, if you have any other questions, now is a good time to drop them in. But I watched a performance of yours, and I really enjoyed it, and I really wanted to ask you about it, which is and correct me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, but the tact performance. Did I say that right? The TACET,
Tacit, tacit.
tacit,
Oh my god.
tacit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Please tell everybody, for those who have not seen this performance, what this performance is about,
Wow.
so they
Yeah.
understand why I'm asking you about it. I thought it was I thought it was very interesting, it was amazing.
It's so I mean, gosh. Okay. Yeah, so I have to admit that that was a very long ago. I mean, it was and it
Mhm,
wasn't. I mean, it was only a few years ago, but it feels like it was a lifetime ago.
mhm.
It feels like you just dug something up out of my, like, dusty kind of musical
The Google
archives.
test.
Yeah, wow. I haven't thought about that piece in a while. So, that was, that project actually was a really big in many ways was a big turning point for me as a solo like, as a improviser and a soloist.
Mm,
It was part of a residency that I did at the Hammer Museum, which is a museum here in an art gallery museum here in Los Angeles.
mhm,
Um, and where I was there for, I believe, many weeks. I'm a little fuzzy on the details, but basically we kind of it was like an artist in residence program. So we would go and we would be on in the space and we would be making our work and workshopping our piece while the museum goers were doing their thing. And like sometimes they would stop and kind of like, you know, look at you for a while. And I'm there with a trumpet. So I'm very noticeable and I'm very audible, right? And so they're like, "What?" And they would kinda gather and they would, like, wait for me to do something cool to kind of to kind of, like, entertain them or something. Anyway, and it was a really odd experience, and, the piece kind of grew at the same time. So I'm sorry this answer is meandering, but I'm kinda piecing this together after many years, but at the same time, I was reading a lot of writing from Pauline Oliveros, who I talk about a lot. If any of you have
mhm,
listened to any of my other live streams, I tend to bring her up a lot for good reason. But Pauline Oliveros was a incredible pioneer of the electronic and electroacoustic music world and early tape music, early modular synthesis, early
mhm.
I'm pointing behind me because of the buchla, but
Right.
um, and so beyond that, she also later on in her life uh, dedicated much of her practice to this idea called deep listening, which
Mhm,
is she kind of referred to it as a way of life or as like a
mm,
kind of a meditation, but the idea
mhm.
in a very brief description is that you approach any sound in the world as being significant. So any sound, it could be something that comes out of your instrument or out of your mind or your body, or it could be some incidental sound like a truck going by or an alarm going off or a dog barking. But you listen to it with intent and awareness and like presence. And you engage with it as though it's kind of part of your musical practice or part
Mhm.
of your musical journey. It's not just like a sound that's happening to you, it's a sound that's happening like with you, you know?
Right.
And
Mhm.
So that, and then this very public kind of residency that I was doing where I was being observed in this really unusual way, um, led me to really think about what it meant to be a performer and to kind of be in that really vulnerable position. And then also, um, being a woman and kind of sometimes feeling like I needed to really be louder than everyone else in order to be heard at the same level, so to speak, and
Mhm.
different things like that. Just kind of this, like, I was just navigating all of these really interesting and challenging ideas, uh, in the trumpet world, in the just world in general. But
Mhm.
but moreover, so what ended up happening was this piece that developed. This is a really long answer. I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh, I'm
No,
just
no.
going.
I
But this this piece that developed, it kind of took form as a kind of performance art piece in a way, where I would walk onto stage and I would stand silent until people would pay attention. And I wouldn't try to get their attention by doing anything performative, like making a loud sound or
Mhm.
bowing, or there would be no dimming of the lights or anything like that. I would just be in this room. And the actual final performance, that I did, there were it was packed to the brim of people. There were so many people. I couldn't wrap my head around where all of these people came from, but I guess they just came. Um, and it was, like, hot and stuffy, and there were people everywhere, and I just stood there for what felt like an eternity, making eye contact with people, which was a
I
really
saw that.
weird thing to do. And they would laugh and they would snicker because they were uncomfortable. I was, like, breaking that barrier. That's usually
Mhm.
something you don't do in performance. Um, and I just waited. And then eventually, about 10, 15 minutes in, I don't know, everything finally settled, and then I just
Mhm.
improvised. I didn't have a plan. The last thing I thought about was what I was actually gonna do once the room settled. But the significant part of the piece for me was the silence that was so noisy up until the point that it finally stopped. And the room, when it did settle, there was just this incredible feeling where everyone was like, "Whoa," like, "We were being really loud." Really loud, folks.
I just was watching you, watching
Watching
them, and just
them.
making eye contact, and
Yeah,
yeah, you were just looking around.
it was a really intense experience, but,
It
you
seems
know
very vulnerable yet powerful in
v
ter at the same time,
yeah,
that's what was yeah.
I think that was kind of what I was exploring at that point, was my personal comfort being in a performative position, being on stage and kind of letting myself be that vulnerable.
Mhm.
That's something as an improviser, it's really important to me that I'm, like, actually discovering the sounds in real time. So
Mhm.
I try really hard not to plan my improvisations. Like, I just wanna play, and sometimes it means that the wheels come off and things break and things don't sound good or awesome. But again, if you think about this idea of deep listening, you know, can something really be that bad if you're approaching it with that kind of, like, mindful intention and awareness, you know?
Right,
Like, what is a mistake if you're kind of really engaged in the whole creative process and, like, listening to everything? Um, so, yeah, I love
right,
the idea that when you're performing live, even if it's on a live stream, that everyone around you is sharing in this creative experience. We're all hearing it for the first time at the same time.
right. It's
Um,
cool because, like, it's just such a different. It stuck with me, and thank you for sharing, and I wanted everyone that's watching to hear it, and if you have not seen this performance, go to her webpage, and I will leave the direct link in the description so people can find it, just so they don't if that's okay with you, I'm gonna leave, like, a direct link to it. But it's just such a different approach to a performance because as, someone who performs live, like, sometimes and I've heard other performers say as well that you just kinda get in this headspace and you're often in your own world and you go up and you become connected with your instruments or instrument, and you're in that moment. And some people often do not fully engage with who's watching, or it's really, even though it's for the audience, it's still something very personal and an experience. It's like more, it's just two simultaneous experiences are happening.
Yeah.
The personal one between you and your instruments, and then the one where the experience where people are watching and hearing. And so this is like completely different, where it's like lifting this sort of, I don't want to say veil, but this protective cloak, I guess, before starting.
Yeah,
So that's what
totally.
really stuck with me, which
You know,
I thought it was very powerful,
thank
because
you.
I mean, it is, I'm sure people do struggle with, as they perform, like stage fright or anxiety or all those things. And
Oh my gosh, yeah.
it's a lot to like set that aside or be conscious of that and be silent before
Yeah.
you start.
You brought up a really good point, which I didn't mention, but is really relevant. Part of the reason why I did this is because, and some people might not, I talk about this a lot, and a lot of people are like, that's not possible. But I used to suffer from very, very, very intense stage fright.
Me
Very
too.
intense, very intense.
Yes.
And doing that piece in particular, the reason why I said it was kind of a pivotal moment for me
Mhm.
is because part of it was about combating that fear and like asking myself, like, what am I why am I afraid? Like, is this group of people standing here waiting for me to make a mistake? Like, that's what I was telling myself in my mind. But when I
Mhm.
took all that time to just stand in front of them, and they were all expecting me to do something, right? Because I'm like supposed to
Standing
be
with a trumpet in
performing.
your hand.
Yeah, they're like, and it's such a weird thing to do, but I could feel like I was standing there, and it got to a point where it was so quiet I could feel my own like heart beating. I could hear it. Um and it was such now just talking about it, I'm like reliving all these visceral, like my hands are getting clammy just kind of remembering.
Right.
But but it was such a big moment for me. And there was a point about 10, 15 minutes into standing there when it just all of that nerves kind of settled, and I shifted more into this, like, we're all here together, like I'm not here to like perform at these people.
Mhm.
I'm here to make sound and to listen to sound, and they're here to do the same thing, to listen to sound, and we're all going to kind of share this creative moment together, for lack of a better expression. And that took a lot of the pressure off. So that really was kind of life changing for me in a way. And there's this thing that
Mhm.
to go back full circle back to Pauline Oliveros, just to kind of wrap this up. There's this idea of stepping out onto stage and taking a moment to just to listen before you make sound. Just to
Mhm.
quiet yourself, to open your ears, to open your kind of, your imagination, and to just listen to the room, to the shuffling of people, to like whatever's happening outside, and to kind of not just be open to like what you're about to do, but to any possible sound in the audible universe.
Mhm.
And I found
Mhm.
that so profound. And so that's kind of what I was doing in that piece. I was just standing there to like be open to any possible sound. And now I do that on a much shorter, much, 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 much shorter scale. I do it before every single performance. So if anyone's seen me play live, you probably noticed that when I come out, I never just start. I always kind of stand there and like listen for a minute, and it helps calm my nerves.
Kinda
Um,
ground you a little bit,
yeah,
get
it's
connected.
almost magic for me. It's really amazing. So it could be useful if anyone else has that kind of anxiety, but
Mhm.
to try, and just to remember that we're all in it together. We're all here to kind of share and celebrate the music, and we're not all waiting for you to make a mistake.
Right,
As much as you might feel that way, that's not what we're doing.
right. I too used to suffer from severe stage fright and, like, just speaking in general to a group of people. So,
I get it. Yeah.
yeah, it's Yeah, and babe, that's probably one of the reasons why it stuck with me. It's just, yeah, but that's amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
thanks.
definitely going to put the direct link in the description so people can go back, go and watch this. Because yes, but thank you. A lot of amazing comments in the chat. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you can see if you're able
Oh
to
yeah.
read the
I
chat and
can't.
see what's happening, but uh, Jono just said like you're an inspiration to him. And can you pop that one up? Sure if you saw that. Thank you. And yeah, it's just
Oh,
yeah.
Jono.
And
That's really nice to hear.
OSCDG and just overall, just really great comments. I just want to say thank you to you for coming on and sharing your story, number one. And also thank you to everyone in the chat for hanging out and
Yeah.
listening and being a part of Faders Up. It's just, this is one of the reasons why I really like to do this show, is just to have this conversation right here. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I'm looking now through the comments. Thank you. These are all really nice to see.
And
Yeah.
yeah. So thank you, everyone. And, hit that subscribe and like button and check out Sarah's website. And she has a band camp as well, so you can experience some of her music. And definitely check out the Patreon. Thanks, Malarkey, for bringing that up. That's pretty cool. The postcard.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. But
Cool.
I just want to quickly just look through the chat just for a moment, just to make sure I didn't miss anyone's questions. I know there was a lot of good comments happening, and I think we may have got them all answered. But I like to make sure everyone is heard if I can. And yeah, and this I know you mentioned a couple of your influences, but just what's your plans next year? And then as we wrap it up here.
That's a huge question.
Yeah, you like it? I'm just gonna drop that bomb right there. Just in a like, I know this year has been absolutely crazy for everyone. So
Just to wrap things up, what are you doing next
yeah,
year?
yeah, yeah. What are you gonna do next year? Like there's a lot of things happening.
So funny. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Just like a couple
pick one thing.
highlights.
I think
Okay, one thing. Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that I'm currently working on that I'm really looking forward to in regards to next year is a new album, which I haven't really officially announced. This might actually be the moment, I guess, that
Nice.
I've
All
done that.
right,
I'm not
everyone,
sure.
you've heard it here.
You heard it here, folks. Um, yeah, I kind of took the quarantine thing and I've just been enjoying really spending time like alone, making this music really slowly and giving myself the ability to layer tracks on tracks and tracks and kind of just orchestrate things out in a much bigger way than I normally do. Usually in the past, everything I do is live and intended to be, it's all real time. Like my last album, which was also my first album, is
Like that.
is was all recorded in one take. And it was really important to
Okay.
me to like have that immediacy. I was wanting to kind of do a snapshot in time, sit down in the studio, record it all in one go and just say, this is it. This is what happened in that moment. This one I'm kind of approaching in the complete opposite way. I'm like composing out things and improvising with them and layering. So it's all buchla modular and various brass instruments and voice. And I'm just kind of letting it grow as it wants to grow. So
Nice.
2021, I don't know when. I have no projected zone within the year, but the best way, if you want to know about it, is probably, I think you can follow people on Bandcamp, perhaps.
Yes.
Can you do that? So that might be the
Yes.
best way to do it if you're interested in hearing more about when it arrives.
So everyone go follow her Bandcamp.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest
Yep.
thing that I want to share. I'm really having fun with it and definitely different vibe than what I did before, but you know, just rolling with the just exploring and letting what
Letting it
happens
happen.
happen. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, then on that note, sit tight, Sarah. But I just want to say goodnight to everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Faders Up. This is the last one for 2020. We'll see you in January. And again, thank you and have a good night.